Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan Gregoire. I am the Legislative Director of your New York State Association of Counties. On behalf of our President, Jack Marin, and our Executive Director, Stephen Aquario, I want to thank you for joining us this morning for a virtual fall seminar workshop about the November 2020 elections. Our 2020 virtual fall seminar is taking place from September 15th through the end of September and includes nearly 20 workshops and meetings designed to bring the latest information on issues facing today's county leaders. We thank you for joining us as we move hashtag counties forward together. And hashtag counties forward together is our hashtag for this conference. And we encourage you to tweet about what you're hearing throughout the conference. And we're really hoping that you will engage with us and participate in our fall seminar for a chance to win some prizes from our sponsors. So for those of you on Twitter, we have a weekly tweet off, and whoever tweets the most throughout the time of this week using hashtag counties forward together will win a prize from a sponsor. And this week's tweet off is sponsored by Auctions International, who will be providing a JBL Bluetooth speaker. For those of you on Instagram, we're hosting a Counties Forward Together photo contest. To participate, simply post a photo about how your county is moving forward with hashtag Counties Forward Together and tag us at NYS Counties. A winning photo will be selected at the end of the conference and will also win a prize from a sponsor. And lastly, for everyone on today's call, you're eligible for all three of these criteria. We have a perfect attendance award drawing in which one fall seminar participant with perfect workshop attendance will be selected at random from a prize from a sponsor. To learn more about all these contests, please visit nysac.org/contests. So this November's election will really be like any in recent history and will be the first large-scale test of the state's early voting laws and COVID-19 election reforms. This webinar brings together state and county election administration experts to discuss changes in how this election is going to be administered ahead of the November general election. So today we are joined by Todd Valentine and Robert Brem, co-executive directors of the New York State Board of Elections, as well as Kelly Penzuel, the immediate past president of the New York State Commissioners Association and one of the two Steuben County election commissioners. We are extremely grateful for having you join us this morning. And here at NYSAC, we really have endeavored to create strong partnerships with our state agencies. And I'm grateful really for this partnership with the State Board and NYSECA. It's been terrific working with the three of you. And we thank you for always having that open line of communication. Before we begin this webinar today, I want to draw your attention to the slideshow now to thank NTS Data Services for sponsoring today's webinar. New York State-based NTS Data Services works in close partnership with 50 counties and over 70 school districts across the Empire State to develop and apply election technology applications. These applications include voter registration solutions, critical supporting modules, and cybersecurity expertise to aid our counties in securing their critical data from adversarial entities. If your county is looking for cost-effective resources to aid in protecting your critical data from outside intrusion, look no further than your own backyard. NTS Data Services is here to serve. And then lastly, just a bit of household keeping items before I kick it over to Bob and Todd. If you have a question during the presentation, please type the question into the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. We will answer those questions in the order which they are received after today's planned remarks. And again, thank you for being with us today. We hope that you find this presentation helpful and educational. And as a last reminder, you can view all of our upcoming fall seminar webinars at www.nysac.org/fall seminar. Don't forget to tweet us using hashtag counties forward together. You may just win a prize. And with that, I will now turn it over to Todd and Bob. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Again, we appreciate being invited. I mean, this is, you know, a partnership that we've fostered for quite some time now, just to make sure that, you know, the connection between the boards of elections and obviously the county management and legislature. And no more important time than that during elections. If we can go to our first slide, we got a list of what we wanted to cover today. And then obviously, you know, we'll hear a local perspective from Kelly Penziol, who was now the immediate past president of the Election Commissioners Association of the state. You may have heard of it. But we want to talk just briefly on the agenda. We're going to run through some of the major. You may have known that the legislature has done a few things, and the governor has issued a number of executive orders. So we wanted to run through the ones that we see impacting the general election right now. Obviously, funding is always an issue. So we wanted to talk briefly about what grant programs that are out there from the state that are available for the counties to use as resources, and you know, we have a takeaway for you for that. And then one of the last things we want to cover, because we don't want to forget about it, is we've issued a number of cybersecurity directives to the counties. A lot of it, and again, working in conjunction with the NYSAC, the state and local IT Directors Association, to as well as NYSAC, to foster that relationship to improve the cybersecurity posture of not just the state board, but also the counties and the county board of elections. And so we have a number of things that we've been working on in the last couple of years. We're, again, approaching an election, so we highlighted a few things that we wanted the counties to deal with. Bob?
Next slide. We wanted to start with there are a series of bills or laws that were enacted, executive orders, and in some instances litigation that brought about changes in how we're administering the November general election. I think it's important to point out at the beginning, we had about 1.2 million voters in the June primary, with various other elections added to that day. We expect about 8 million for this November's election, so about 7 times the participation level that we experienced in June. But the first item on the list is absentee applications. There's both an executive order 202.58 and chapter 91 that for this year allows absentee applications to be received via phone, fax, email, or in the instance of a web portal, it needs to be a web portal administered by a board of elections. So the state of New York stood up a web portal for those county boards of election that didn't have the resources to do it on their own. And locally, Erie County and New York City have their own web portal. All the rest of the counties are using the state. Certainly, it's an electronic application process, does not require a wet signature on the application, but the security is still required that a signature appear on the ballot oath envelope that is returned before it can be counted. Next slide.
Illness definition expanded. This was originally in an executive order, but now for the fall election, it's been reduced or expanded into Chapter 139 of the laws of this year, and it's effective right now. And what this does was define the term illness to include, you know, anybody who might be at risk of contracting or spreading a disease. Basically, you know, it was obviously designed for COVID issues. So that's what many voters, if they want to check and are feeling for COVID, the form didn't need to change. They would just check temporary illness as the one on the form. So that's what that allowed that to happen for, again, for the June primary by executive order and for the general election by this chapter of the law.
Next slide. Accessible absentee applications. This is in relation to a settlement and a lawsuit. It requires the state board the state board and all the county boards to have a uniform mandatory process in place that would allow voters with visual disability to request and receive by email an absentee ballot that would allow them to use standard tools to read the ballot to them so that they can independently mark the ballot. So that is a litigation, a settlement. It probably in all likelihood will be a permanent, but right now we're getting through this November, and then we'll look to see how best to implement something going forward. But this is a requirement for individuals to mark a ballot and for boards of elections to prepare an accessible ballot that can be emailed to every voter. So the requirement is that once the county boards of elections prepare the ballot, which they've been doing over the last several days to get ready to mail out no later than this Friday to military voters, but those ballots for each different ballot style needs to be sent to a particular vendor. We have a list of approved vendors that we've provided to the counties, and they must make an accessible ballot for each different style in each county so that it can readily be made available to voters upon request.
I see I forgot to put in here, how does a person who wants to access this, there is another portal we put on our website that the county boards on their own websites would link to our website. And just one side note to this, this accessibility of websites has been an issue we've been dealing with under separate litigation for a couple of years now to make sure that everything that's available on our website is actually screen readable by persons with limited vision disability. So this is, for us, it may be new to you, this concept of screen readability, but it's something we've been working on for a while. This was a big extension of it, but an extension nonetheless. I want to go to the next slide. Uniform absentee envelopes. Again, this is pursuant to executive order. These were effective September 8th, so that's when they were supposed to be ready. And pretty close to it. While the elements of the statute set forth what goes on the envelope, it never required a uniformity across the entire state. Probably for good reason, as we learned trying to come up with a uniform envelope. The envelope, part of this was triggered by trying to make sure that it was clear with the increased number of people using mail to return the ballots or using an absentee ballot, that they wanted to highlight that the voter could where to sign and could sign it and make it more usable to the voter. But with New York State being complicated as it is, we have a couple different sizes of envelopes that we use, and actually it's a series of 3 envelopes that go in an absentee ballot mailing. There's the envelope that we mail out to the voter, the one that the voter, the oath envelope we just referred to in the last, and just a little before this, where they sign it and put their ballot in it, and then that envelope with the ballot inside gets put inside another envelope that then gets mailed back to the County Board of Elections, and then from there they count the ballot. But that also has to deal with multiple languages. Our most complicated envelope was in New York City. They have, in Queens, they have a section that requires 5 different languages, so the envelope had to be slightly larger to accommodate that. We have a number of counties that have both English and Spanish, so we had to have an envelope for that. So it's as uniform as we could make it to accommodate the varying needs of all the counties. And being it's an envelope that's going through the mail, that also required, since the counties were changing their mailing, to make sure that it was designed for postal service approval, so that when it gets sent and can get processed as quick as possible through the system. So, it sounded real easy in the executive order, but it took a lot more work than I think even we imagined that it was going to take, considering all the things that needed to go on it were listed out in the statute. So, but to the county's credit, they're working through it. By and large, they're almost all through the approval process for the postal service, and we have an expectation that there should be no delay in sending out ballots. So that got turned around pretty quick. So we think that that's something new. And while we had to change it because the statute reflected a change in the date to return the ballot. So for this year only, you used to postmark it the day before the election. Now it allows you to postmark the day of the election, which was by statute on the envelope. So that was the basic driver for that. So a lot of the design concepts we'll be able to use into next year, but we've advised the counties to be cautious on any large print runs, obviously to save money. So depending upon how next year goes, don't throw away your old stock yet, because that might come back too. So, we're trying to balance out the cost versus, meeting the requirements and then looking to the future, which you wouldn't think would be such a thing with a simple concept like a uniform envelope. Next slide.
This is a new requirement that is the trend throughout the country. There have been several cases of recent number of months, and then in the last couple of years that put this on our doorstep, but most importantly, litigation. But it's covered in a chapter law, an executive order, and 2 court cases. So it requires the boards of elections to review every voted absentee ballot for certain types of errors, and if the bipartisan board of election determines that there's a signature missing, envelope isn't properly sealed, the signature is of a notary or someone who's not the voter, the witness to the signature's there, but the mark is not. There's a certain number of them that would allow a voter to cure them so that their vote can count. But it requires the boards to make those determinations and to send out notices within a day of the determination. So that's additional responsibility on boards of elections, because as soon as the ballots go out, they start coming back, and those reviews happen as they're coming back. There's 2 different deadlines. The statute required a 7-day from the date of the notice is sent to correct the deficiency, and but after the election, the executive order shrinks that to 5 days. So there will be increased work on boards of elections, postage, mailing, and all of the tracking of those ballots. And if you look at where we're at in the ballot world, we've been looking at the state portal. We have about 275,000 people have applied for an absentee ballot through the state portal since it went up a week ago, 2 weeks ago Monday.
2 weeks? Sure.
So that's not counting the portal activity in New York City or in Erie County, and it doesn't count the other ways that a voter can request an absentee. So we're well on our way of having the largest number of absentees we've ever had.
Yeah.
So certainly an ability to be a cure provision so that we can count as many as we can count coupled with the work that we've already talked about, making an envelope that is more easily understood by voters, is hopefully will come together and we'll have less errors that require the notice in the first place.
One can only hope.
Next slide.
So as we said, when the ballot comes back, as I referred to before, you may have seen a theme here on absentee ballots as we kind of group them together. This change, Chapter 140, changed the date by which they can be postmarked through Election Day. So this, and it also added a new concept that if it's received after the day after Election Day, then it's still going to be valid, you know, with the idea that
Received by mail.
received by mail, that is, I'm sorry. Received by mail, because the mail doesn't move that fast. We don't have one-day mail delivery, so presumably you would have postmarked it on time by Election Day. So it didn't change the receipt deadline on the back end. That's still the same. We have two slightly different ones. Regular absentees are 7 days after the election. And for the UOCAVA, which is the Uniformed Overseas Citizen Voting Act, citizens, they're missing a letter there. But it's the overseas and military voters. They have 13 days to return their ballots for a longer transit time from when they get sent to when they come back. Just as an aside, on the receipt after the election days, many states don't allow that, where in a small minority that allows receipt of the ballot after Election Day. You still have to postmark it so we know that it was voted before Election Day, on or before Election Day, but we've had that receipt deadline in there for forever. I don't know, just because we always use postmark as our benchmark. Postmark, and certainly you can turn it in person. So that's something that we had to advise the counties. And again, this was, as I mentioned before, one of the reasons we had to change the envelope, because by statute, telling the voter when to return it was actually on the envelope. And we highlighted that. That's part of what we did in looking at usability, to emphasize, to avoid, just as Bob said on the previous slide, if we can get you to do it right the first time, then there's less we need to do for cures on the back end. So,
next slide. An information mailing. The executive order required that county boards of elections send an additional information mailing out to every voter. So 13 million notices were in the mail, and the requirement that the notices cover a certain number of topics: the date, hours, and locations for early voting in each county, including the early voting location for which the voter is assigned. So if you're a county that only has one site, that's easy. You can just put the one site. But here, we go from New York City has about 90 sites. Erie County has 37. So depending on the size of your county, that might not be possible. So they usually put a link to where on the website that full list is. The next item is information regarding how to apply for an absentee ballot, including the opportunity to apply online or by phone, including the deadline for requesting an absentee ballot. So that is out there. Information regarding the date and hours for the November general election and the voters' election day polling place location. So that required specific information for each election district in the state so that the voter would know their particular polling location. Information regarding how the voter can look up the registration status. That was on there so that if there's any issue, they can be informed that they can reach out immediately to update their voter record if for some reason it's out of date.
well, like they've moved or something.
So they can get the correct, that should help them to, if they take advantage of that information, to have a better voting experience because they won't hold up the lines on election day. The next item is an explicit reminder, the opportunities to vote prior to election day. We certainly want, with our second general election, use of early voting in order to try and address any, those 8 million anticipated votes that will come in this election. The more we can stretch that out over the 9 days of early voting that begin October 24th and end on November 1st, that would help, because we have, somewhere just shy of 300 locations in the state, and they're well staffed. They have plenty of PPE to provide a safe environment, and it certainly would help to get as many people through that process so that we don't have the long lines on election day, which will be harder to manage. And then the last item on the list is expected mail times. An important point that has come out in this expansion of absentee voting is how critically out of date New York statute is. New York law allows a person to request an absentee ballot by mail, postmarked 7 days before the election, which in many instances puts it at an impossible point in time where a board can receive it, process it, and mail a ballot back to the voter so that the voter can receive it and in time to vote. So we had recommended, the state board, consistent with what the post office recommendation is, that the New York State change the law to require an application, if a voter wants us to mail them the ballot, to be received 15 days before, and that boards of election would provide them the ballot shortly thereafter, so that the voter will have plenty of time to receive it. The post office guidelines, if you're mailing something first class, say within your own community, is 2 to 5 days. If you're mailing it across state, it's like 3 to 5 days. If you're an absentee voter and you've gone to South Florida, South Carolina, as we call them, snowbirds, it could take as many as 10 days for the mail to go from New York to that location. So certainly a deadline that makes it impossible is no help to the voter. So we did not succeed in getting the law changed to fix that, but we have been advising in all of the communications, the envelopes that the ballots are in, this notice, and et cetera, that we strongly urge anybody who wants a ballot by mail to apply by 15 days.
And you may have gotten another mailing. The U.S. Postal Service also sent out their own mailing on reminding voters if they're voting by absentee, which did include their recommendation of the 15-day notice, but that was something they sent out by themselves. But they were landing around the same time. So you may see 2 notices reminding you about that process.
Next slide.
List of these are more inside stuff, but one of the things that we need to do post-election, and this relates to the staffing needs, is the affidavit ballots. These, we refer to them as affidavit ballots, but they're for voters who come to the polling place whose name's not in the poll book. It could be for a variety of reasons. They've moved to a new county, so their registration hasn't transferred yet to the new county, but they need to vote where they live, so they're voting for the correct candidates. And it comes from the affidavit in that they fill out, it's a regular, the ballot's the same, but they fill out an envelope or an affidavit that's attached to it swearing that they are indeed a resident of the county where they have claimed to be. What we need to do, though, is just to make sure, because voters can, we call it transfer or move within the state from county to county, just to make sure that they didn't, oh, by the way, let me just make sure I voted in the other county just to make sure my vote counts, not nefariously, but it happens, or they voted absentee and then moved after they sent their absentee earlier, and they've moved within before 30 days, so they've kind of crossed a bridge there where they really should be voting at their new county. But either way, what we need to do post-election is we get a list of all of those voters who voted by affidavit. That's one of the last pieces of the puzzle we have to get. Compare that to all the voters who applied for an absentee, and then obviously we take that and put it against the list of those voters who actually voted in person, either early or on election day, and look for any duplicates that may have crossed there. We're not looking for a gotcha. We're looking just to make sure that the ballot is only counted once, and that it's counted in its appropriate place. So, but this executive order was trying to push the counties to do that comparison 48 hours after the election. We'll have to see how that goes, because that's a bit of a challenge time-wise for getting the materials back, but certainly that will help speed up. In the end, the goal was to be able to begin, getting the results quicker than it occurred in the primary. Obviously, we're expecting more mail-in ballots, more absentee ballots. So this was designed to move that along. The second thing was again, by executive order, was the counties were required to submit staffing plans to the state board for part of that, for doing the affidavit and the post-election canvass or counting of the ballots. And they're supposed to send that back to us by the 20th. We've sent out a survey to the counties asking them for, a number of other things. How many poll sites you have, how many early voting sites you have, what staff have you already confirmed, what's the gap. And then from there, it says we're supposed to assist as feasible. Part of that is what we'll go to in a little bit is, some of the grant money that we've given out can provide support for that. But we also participated in National Poll Worker Recruitment Day, which was September 1st, which is kind of still going on. Poll worker recruitment's a year-round activity, but it's been highlighted for this year. And that has generated quite a response. We put an application on our website and kind of drove people to that. And that's producing several thousand on a regular basis that we distribute to the counties for them to, not everybody works out because of scheduling, but the more you have to choose from, the more likelihood you'll get somebody. So that's useful. And Facebook has also joined in that march by posting on across their platform, people to drive them to recruit poll workers. So hopefully that helps for the counties, because you don't always need staff to count the ballots, but in this COVID environment, you need staff to help maintain social distancing in the lines, to clean touch surfaces in between voters during the voting day. So there's a lot of workers that you need just for controlling the election environment and the polling site. So, and that doesn't take a lot of training, but you just got to get bodies to do that.
Well, just one other item in the list, and we will mention it during the grants, but from a county perspective, you pay the election expenses through your budgets. But we strongly encourage county leadership and county boards of election to sit down and to see where you might be able to borrow people from other agencies. So maybe it won't have such a financial impact on the counties, but during the next few weeks with the surge in absentee voting, the phone applications, where the county might be able to loan a certain number of people on a rotating basis so it won't impact their regular duties, would be, we strongly encourage having those conversations just to get the ballots out to the voters early enough so they can get back in time. Next slide. Return of ballots to boards and poll sites. Well, it's been in the law for many, many years, but most people in the smaller volume of absentees never really, if we had some, it was a lot. But certainly in light of the June primary, and there is a lot of conversation about the post office in general that have people reaching out by phone and email and to all of us, can we rely on the U.S. Postal Service? So certainly, if a person applies early, gets their ballot early, and returns it early, there is no reason why the traditional means of returning a ballot shouldn't be available. But if during that last week, where it is either they received their ballot during that last week, or God forbid they waited that long to request the ballot, and they're going to return it by mail, that's where, just putting it in a blue box doesn't guarantee you a postmark that day. It needs to get through a postal facility. And in litigation in the primary, it showed that about 98% people of the time, the day you put your ballot in a mailbox, it will get a postmark that day. But there certainly are some shortcomings with the post office putting a postmark on the envelope. So we remind everybody that we have about 5,000 drop locations in New York State. A voter could always return in person their voted ballot during the absentee period to any office of the Board of Elections. So we have 62 of those. We have about just shy of 300 early voting locations. So a voter's ballot can be returned at any early voting location in the jurisdiction of the Board of Election for that voter during the 9 days of early voting. And the ballot can be returned to any polling site within the jurisdiction of that Board of Elections on Election Day. So because of the increased volume and because of the public concern about the post office, I think it's important for all of us to do two things. One, encourage, if they're going to do it early and return it early, to rely on the traditional methods of delivering them. If they're at that last period of time, boards of election have been asked, and the executive order requires that they have the ability of a voter not to wait in line to vote to drop off an absentee ballot at those locations. So a box that has a slot in the top, the traditional security envelopes that boards of elections provide to inspectors don't have that drop ability, and you can't have it out on the table for voters to touch. So they need something different. Either buy something more sophisticated with a lock, depending on the county, and its ability to secure it, but something, with, could be a banker box on a table with a slot in the top, as long as you put some tamper evident seals on the box and keep it near the inside. It has to be in the care, custody, and control of the Board of Inspectors. These are live ballots in boxes that can't be delivered, outside of the care, custody, and control.
It is a ballot box, so maybe you could dust one off from a museum.
Well, it's possible. Next slide.
Grant programs. This is the one everybody always wants to know about. We talked about a lot of the things that the county have to do, and one of the recent developments, well, not recent, it started originally with the Help America Vote Act in 2002, where some of the original grants have come from, and surprisingly, there's still some of that money left available. But along the years, we've gotten a series of other grants to help the counties for poll site improvements, electronic poll books, part of the capital grants. There was some aid to localities money. And then most recently, there was this year, the federal government, and along with the state match, passed the holocares grant program. So what we put together was a spreadsheet, or a sheet. It gives you all the counties, and then across the various amounts shows you what funds each county has left available underneath the different categories. Now, basically, in most of these categories, you should be able to use those, certainly for early voting. I mean, they are federal grants, so they have limitations in the sense that you can't use them for existing expenses. But let's just walk through the categories. So if we go to the next slide.
So the one that has the shortest period of time to spend the money, we put first. That's the holocares federal grant. The state matched the local share, so the full amount is available for use by counties. You don't have to put up the 20% match.
And we distributed all of that money to the counties.
100% of the grant money was made available to counties to pay for the expense of the unanticipated expenses of administering the elections in 2020 under the pandemic. So the eligible period for counties to spend that money is November 16th, and then it's a very short period of time to claim the money. If you don't claim the money, it's going to be lost. So that's very important. On the chart, there's a link I see on this system for you to download the chart, but also NYSAC will make the chart available to anybody out there. We have asked the counties, they've been busy running the June primary and getting ready for the November election, and they're tracking down their receipts. You really might want to work with them to track down those receipts so you can get the counties put up the money to pay the bill in the first instance, and you're going to want to get every dime of that money back as fast as you can. So you might want to put a team of people from the county financial department to help get those documentation in so you don't lose any money.
Right.
The next one on that list is the Early Voting Aid to Localities grant. That money is available only through the end of this year, and that would allow counties to get reimbursed the costs to implement early voting as a startup program. So people and the unintended costs of early voting. Next slide.
Next one is the Capital Project Early Voting Grant. Similar to the aid to localities, it was designed to deal with early voting expenses, but more capital investment type things, such as electronic poll books and the on-demand ballot printer systems. The total grant of that statewide was $14.7 million. That's being spent down, but it's still something that's available for early voting as it continues. If they needed additional resources, this is the one you would spend down from. We'll talk a little bit more about the election cyber remediation in a second when we get to the directives, but this grant was $9 million that we had from that are to help the counties after we had done, as we had talked in the past about doing a risk assessment of the counties. We put that together, did a plan, which we're just completing this year, to how to fix the things that need to get fixed. And we have $9 million that we can put towards that county. I mean, each county got a base level of about $61,000, and then it was divided, proportionally to the counties above that. So everybody got a base level grant. And that's something that, we want to start working on spending down, because those expenses, again, these are all reimbursement programs, but, the money is there. We don't want you to we don't want you to leave it. The one we call the shoebox. This is one of our older grants. This does date back to the original HAVA funds. It is going down. I think the original HAVA fund was like 220 or 240 million. I've lost track. But it is down, and it's designed to anything that's, if counties have funds available, there's about 6.7 million total statewide. Anything that improves the administration of elections. You can't replace like existing maintenance of efforts. You can't replace existing expenses, but anything where you've done an improvement, then this would be available for that.
Next slide. Oh, more. The last two grants, they're part of the older ones, the HAVA Education and Poll Worker Training. This money has literally been in there since 2010, I think 2009. So this is money to educate and train poll workers, election workers in how to use the equipment, how to administer the election. The last one is poll site improvement grants. That there's still $1 million in that account, and it's been there since 2010. And that is to help make either temporary or permanent improvements to a polling site, depending on what you're doing. Whether it's incidental, it could be permanent. So, I raised the issue of the grant money. As you know, as county governments, when times are tough, sometimes a vacuum cleaner comes along and these accounts get emptied for other purposes, especially when they're as old as they are. So we only put you on notice that the holocares Act was only available from Congress for this year, and that's a deadline that is fixed by the grant. So if you don't get us you don't spend the money by November 16th, and you don't get us your voucher right away, we can't give you the money. And I'm sorry, that's not us, that's them.
Yeah.
For the aid to localities, the early voting aid to locality or capital, that will end at the end of this year. So you have to spend your money, and then they give us a little bit of time into next year to voucher it and get you paid. So those monies are really, you'd want to take advantage of them. Next slide.
We're going to be mindful of our times, but we didn't want to. We would be remiss if we didn't mention where we're at with cybersecurity, because that's one of the things that really has driven our relationship with NYSAC. Because the county board is part of the county's network in many respects, so we have to work together to protect what we can. And what we put together was a plan to have it in an incident response template. I mean, there's several, just a reminder of the things we've been doing is that we have a plan template when an incident occurs. What are the steps that the county has to take? So that's been together, a standard continuity of operations template. A reminder about communications, about making sure that you have contacts. So when something does happen, you know who to call and which person, and you have phone numbers for that. We have continued with education and training. I mean, we've provided to all of the counties the online SANS training, which is basic cyber hygiene training, but we also ran through the counties a series of tabletop exercises that we coordinated with the federal government to just run through some of the scenarios when something goes wrong. And it wasn't necessarily always cyber. Our biggest issues of late have been more nature-oriented, storms, that sort of thing, power outages. So we included that because it does impact the operations. Cyber Navigator remediation services, part of what we did to come up with a plan of what the counties need to do is fix, was partnering with the New York State Technology Enterprise Corporation, or NYSAC, helped to meet with every county and every county IT to guide them through developing a plan. Okay, what can you fix next? And certainly that worked in conjunction with the $9 million grant program. And then the last thing we wanted to touch on were some of the basic cybersecurity directives. And a lot of this was stuff, and we can go to the next slide, were things that you are in large part already doing or have done over the year, but this helped make a public statement to the counties, to the world at large. It's like, look, here's the stuff we're doing. We put up a good defense. We're not like challenge you to come attack us, but
be foolish.
You know, we also want to say, you know, when the questions that comes in from the media or the public at large, like, well, what have you been doing? You know, it's like, oh, well, here's the series of things that we covered, we're doing to protect the cyber. And, you know, a lot of these are, you know, we can only focus on the County Board of Elections, but certainly these are good practices that have to work in conjunction with the county IT. So, you know, how much that concept expands beyond that is up to you. Do you just want to run through those?
I think if you just look at this page, and I think from a time point of view, there's some additional words on the subsequent pages for these categories, but we selected the items on this page because there was a pattern in the statewide Grant Thornton risk assessment that they did uniformly for every county, to look at election infrastructure, policies, procedures, and county, you know, the maturity of the county's security posture. But these were items that we thought were important, that really needed to be addressed before the election. So if, you know, we really encourage the county leadership with the county IT department and the County Board of Elections to go down the checkoff list and to just be sure that we have tested and we have backup and we know the points of contact, because we had, just last year, we had the Halloween rainstorm that impacted 13 counties, and we needed to go to that protocol really quick. And in other instances, we've had cyber attacks that we really needed to talk to people really, really quick. So certainly putting in place certain protections allows us to help bring in the services to stand up your system as quickly as we can.
You want to just go into this
So I
one?
think if we
Just
advance to slide
23 on ours. Go one more. Keep going. Now one more. Another one. That's the one we want. If we leave you with anything, you know, and we're leaving you with those slides because they are technical, they can get technical in nature, which is, we're not the technical people, and this audience probably is not the technical people. We leave you should really talk with your IT department and the county board for some of the details on that. We wanted to put it in here, but didn't want to bog it down. The one thing we do want to leave with you is the cyber incident reporting procedure. You know, this is just a little thing we put together to remind people that we are working in a partnership with the State Division of Homeland Security, DISHs as we like to call them. And they are the people, you know, it's any cyber incident. You know, this isn't just election related. We're the ones that are highlighting that, but the phone numbers are really for any cyber incident you have, you know, and, you know, one of the slides we put in there, an incident, and it's the next slide, is an incident that results or has potential for operations impacts. Like, you see anything hinky, you call that number. And there is somebody there who will get back to you 24/7. You know, it's not necessarily us, it's going to be the DISHs people, and they'll assess your situation. And if they need to send people on the ground, then they will. If they can work remotely with you, they will. If they can tell you that it's nothing, they will. Do not be afraid to call that. They will not judge you. They will not charge you for it. It is a service provided to you by the state of New York. So please, anything that goes weird, call them. When in doubt, call that 800-24 CERT number, and there will be somebody there to help you. Now, the next slide we put up for questions, but I know that Kelly wanted to cover some stuff, so we turn it over to her.
Yes, thank you, Bob and Todd. And Kelly, we'll turn it over to you for some thoughts now, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I guess I just want to touch on what we're doing here at Steuben County. Start out with, we're kind of an average size county, pretty rural size, but we have a total of, between active and inactive voters, we have a total of 63,000 voters. So our requests for absentees are coming in literally, obviously daily. phone calls are ringing off we have 6 staff in the office, which include the commissioners. So we're kind of a small staffed office. We don't have any temporary staff at this point to help with the phone calls and the process for absentee as of yet, but we are looking to some of our inspectors in hopes that we can entice some of them to come in and help us with this process. As you know, the June primary was pretty crazy as far as absentees, and we had topped the absentees just for the primary at over 3,000 for the presidential primary, and that's like 3 times more than we've ever had for a primary. So we were pretty inundated, stayed a lot of late hours to try to keep things caught up. Right now we're at over 3,600 absentees at this point, and that's not counting what's coming in today. And the requests that have been coming in today so far, the phones are still ringing a lot, especially after our mailer letting the voters know about the ways that they can vote early, either by absentee, early voting, going to the poll site, and of course, early voting times and dates. On top of that, my counterpart, Vicki Olin, and I are in the process of doing our election inspector training classes. That's why she wanted to be on the call today, but she's in the middle of doing the class today. We have them sporadic throughout this month and the first part of October. We've gotten a lot, over 100, probably 150 requests to become an inspector. Thanks to the state board's inspector link that they have on their site. We also did link that to our site. So when somebody signs up for that, we automatically get the email for that. And we do contact the voter to try to set them up with a scheduled class. Looks like we have 5 new classes for inspectors already scheduled. And it looks like we're gonna have to open up another class for some more. So our hands have been full, and with the classes, we are actually training the inspectors on our new electronic poll books. We weren't able to get them until January, so we're going to roll them out. We had hoped to do it for the primary, but when COVID hit, that wasn't an option, because we had just started training our inspectors in March when the COVID hit, so everything got put on hold. Our voter registrations have picked up. Since the 1st of August, we've already gotten about 900 new registered voters, and on top of other address changes and stuff, not included in that total. We're in the process of obviously proofing our ballots to get them ready for the absentees, to get them so we can get them mailed out, printed and mailed out. And then on top of that are our poll sites. With the COVID and having to set up for social distancing, we had a lot of poll sites that just weren't equipped to be able to do that because of the size. So we have relocated probably about 14 sites right now. We did merge a couple sites together, but they're much more space there. They're able to do the social distancing. And with the extra inspectors that we're going to have now, I think we'll have that covered as far as being able to clean and sanitize after every voter, and just have the inspectors rotate their jobs throughout the day to keep up with that. I know for some of the other counties, I mean, they've got a lot more requests than we do. I know Chicago County is, on Thursday, they had over 8,000 applications mailed into them. I mean, they're coming in daily with them. A few other counties were quite large totals that, of what they've processed so far. And it's going to be kind of a record turnout between the absentees and voters going to the poll site. We are looking at, I believe Bob and Todd mentioned this, about we use NTS as our vendor, and they do have a program that we're looking to get, in the process of getting, should I say. So the voter will be able to go on to our website and actually track their ballot. So they'll know when we received their application, when their ballot was mailed to them, when we received their ballot back to us. This is kind of new to us, so we're kind of working on getting that program and hopefully get it up soon so we can make sure it's all working properly. We did order a drop box for ballots. That is also going to be here at the county office in front of the main county office building. We felt that was the safest place to locate it because there is security round the clock there, along with cameras, video cameras there, so nothing gets tampered with. And then we just have to worry about having enough staff to help test the machines. We have to do our testing of the machines and the ballots when we get those, and get everything prepared and get all our supplies ready to go for the day before the election that we ship out. I don't believe I have anything else to cover. We're so overwhelmed here right now. Our heads are still spinning, trying to keep up with all the new changes. And I have a notebook here of writing down what to do next and when it was completed. So I believe that's all I have to say right at this time.
Okay, great, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate everyone for coming on today. I know, as you just mentioned, Kelly, you're all extremely busy. So there are a few questions that I want to get to. And I think this first question is for everyone. And just as a reminder to the folks who are listening in today, if you do have a question, you can submit that in the question box on your dashboard.
It might be. Yeah, that's
okay. So the first question up is, how does a board of election know or confirm if a voter is disabled?
Disability is not always a visual disabilities, and boards tend not to ask that. A voter tells you if they need assistance or not.
But you don't necessarily know why.
If they need the board to provide the assistance, but mostly, for example, at the polling site, at an early voting site, there already are ballot marking devices and tools at the polling site. Yeah. So a voter may use the ballot marking device because they want to be able to use the features of that device to help them mark the ballot, or they might not be disabled and they still want to use that device.
And for the accessible absentees, they actually make, there's a box on the application where they make a sworn statement that they are indeed in need of this. So they make an attestation to the effect that they have visual issues and require such assistance.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is, and I think maybe Bob and Todd, you've touched on this when you covered the grants section, but is the state covering any of the printing, mailing costs of any of those driven by the executive orders from the governor?
Yes.
To the extent they qualify, so
yeah.
If it is new and it's responding to the pandemic, it would be eligible for use of certain federal grant money.
So like the informational mailer that was mandated to be sent out could be.
So that information mailer is good for the COVID CARES grant, the original shoebox grant, or even the aid to localities early voting, because it includes information on where you can vote early. So if you have money in any or all of those three accounts, it could be used.
Yeah, we use the CARES grant first because that's the one that expires.
To reprint the absentee envelopes, the two of those would work.
Right.
The shoebox and the CARES would work. To that extent.
Because that's not an early voting.
Right. If we've always had, say, 400,000 absentee voters and say we're at 1 million, you wouldn't necessarily want to come in for the entire cost under the federal program, but certainly the unanticipated increase would qualify.
Right. So that extra ordinary amount above would, because otherwise you'd be replacing existing maintenance of effort, which would not be permitted under the federal grant.
Excellent. Okay, thank you both. This question is on cybersecurity. Dominion ICE machines are thought to be vulnerable to hacking. What measures are counties taking to harden against cyber hacking on these devices and others?
Well, certainly the certification of those equipment provided, there's certain security protocols that we have in place for any voting system, and they continue for counties that utilize the ICE machine for both physical and pre and post-election examination to determine that if the potential has anybody broken the seals and changed the software hardware that's on those machines. It's examined both before and after each election.
Mhm.
I don't want to go through the whole list of the security protocols while we're in a public setting either, but they're in existence.
But if they follow the procedures for operating the system as it was designed, then and on top of the testing before and after, so we feel confident that that's as strong as you could make it.
Okay, great. And then the last question that we have before I offer some concluding remarks, and please feel free if anyone would like to say something, please do so as well. The last question here is, and I believe this is a Senator Neil Breslin bill, but what is the status of the proposal to require early voting sites in the most populous districts? Will funding be available to cover the cost in rural counties that only need one site? It would be a big staffing expense for us.
There were somewhere around 8 or 9 early voting bills that from my last recollection moving through the legislature. So it's hard for me to remember all of them. I think Senator Breslin and Assemblyman McDonald addressed what they thought was a shortcoming in Rensselaer County and Troy, New York, that there wasn't a site in Troy in the first year that program was operating. Since then, of course, Rensselaer County has located one in Troy in the second year. But there's a number of formulas out there, both based on registered voters or population, towns, cities. So it's uncertain, the wording of those bills, how many additional sites would be required. When we did the grant program, we tried to incentivize, especially in rural parts of the state, even though population-wise you might only need one, it's still, you might have wanted to put a second one just because of geography. It takes a long time to get from one part of the county to another. So we tried to put a grant money out there that would allow to open a second site, at least from an equipment and a staffing point of view.
The initial funding for it.
At least during the initial funding. And not that we tried to push people to open to, but whether you're in an urban area and the numbers demanded it, in the rural areas, just the geography played a factor.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending this virtual fall seminar workshop on the November 2020 elections, and particularly thank both Robert and Todd and Kelly for joining us this morning, and of course, our sponsor, NTS Data Services, for sponsoring this session. You'll be able to find a recording of this webinar and a copy of the presentation on our website at www.nysac.org/fall seminar. And we hope to see you this afternoon at our next virtual fall seminar workshop. Take care, everyone. And again, thank you very much to the three of you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for having us.